people expect to find a museum like the Homestead in the City of Industry. But everything you see here is in its original location, with surprising stories to be found around every corner. Called one of California's true historic treasures by the Smithsonian Institution, the 6-acre site features the Workman House, an 1870s country home constructed around an 1840s adobe built by William and Nicolasa Workman. La Casa Nueva, a 1920s Spanish colonial revival mansion noted for its architectural crafts, built by the workman's grandson, Walter Temple, and his family. And El Camposanto, one of the region's oldest private cemeteries.
Spanish influence in the house and Mr.
When people think about history, they might think of our founding fathers or of a past that they have little connection with. At the Homestead, we turn that on its head. Our stories are everyone's stories. The families who built their homes here never expected that one day this place would become a museum, but here we are, encouraging people to think about their own connections with history.
Our story begins in 1841, when California was still part of Mexico. Using the old Spanish Trail, William Workman and his family, along with business partner and friend John Rowland, and dozens of others came to Los Angeles from Taos, New Mexico. In an area east of Los Angeles, on land formerly owned by the San Gabriel Mission, they acquired Rancho La Puente. The rancho expanded within a few years to over 48,000 acres. They raised cattle for their skins or hides and fat called tallow, which were valuable trade goods. Shortly after their arrival, the Workmans built a modest 3-room adobe, similar in style to this drawing. It was remodeled in the late 1860s, adding a second floor and numerous decorative details. Believed to have been designed by early Los Angeles architect Ezra Kaiser, the remodeling of the structure transformed it into a modern American house. What makes it so unique, however, is that the original adobe is still part of the core structure. Today, the exterior of the Workman House is restored to its Victorian-era appearance, while the interior has been renovated for exhibit space. The Workmans had 2 children, Margarita and Joseph. No known pictures of Joseph survive. Margarita married Francis Pliny Fisk, or FPF Temple, which is where the Temple connection comes into our story. The couple had 11 children, 8 of whom lived into adulthood. As a result of the Mexican-American War, which ended in 1848, part of the land seized by the United States from Mexico became California. At the same time, the gold rush began. Like other ranchers, the Workmans and Temples found a new market for fresh beef and became quite wealthy. Sadly, the decline of the gold rush and flood and drought in the 1860s brought ruin to many cattle ranchers. Some who also farmed, like the Workmans and Temples, were able to survive.
As Los Angeles started to grow after the Civil War, the Workman and Temple families saw opportunity. They were ranchers and farmers, and they saw that the business world was another endeavor they could get involved in. So William Workman and his son-in-law, FPF Temple, got involved in early railroads, real estate, oil, and banking. And they had the choicest property in downtown Los Angeles from which to operate, which was called the Temple Block, now Los Angeles City Hall. Unfortunately, being ranchers and farmers and not very well versed in business practices, they had some issues to deal with.
Their most ambitious effort was the opening of a bank. But in 1875, an economic panic erupted. The men borrowed money from Elias Lucky Baldwin to try and save their bank, but the gamble failed. Having mortgaged most of their land holdings to Baldwin, Temple and Workman were financially ruined, and most of their land was lost. Though members of the Temple family bought back the Workman house and surrounding land, they struggled to stay afloat financially, and by the turn of the century, lost the house and the land. In 1914, Walter P. Temple, a grandson of the workmen's, was living in Montebello with his wife Laura and their 4 children. The Temple's 9-year-old son Thomas discovered oil on the family's land. This allowed the Temples to repurchase a portion of the workman homestead. They remodeled the workman house, adding modern conveniences such as electricity and indoor plumbing, and renovated El Camposanto Cemetery, adding a mausoleum in which family members and family friend Pio Pico, the last governor of Mexican California, are laid to rest. The Temple soon commissioned Los Angeles architects Walker and Eisen, and later Roy Selden Price, to design La Casa Nueva, or the New House. Built between 1922 and 1927, this 12,400 square foot Spanish colonial revival mansion is noted for its fine architectural crafts, including stained glass, ceramic tile, wrought iron, and carved wood. While the Temples had 5 children, only 4 survived into adulthood. Their second child, Alvina, died as an infant. Thomas, Agnes, Walter Jr., and Edgar were often away at school during construction of the house, but letters they wrote to each other mentioned its progress. In a letter to her brother Thomas in December of 1928, Agnes wrote,
"I must tell you something about Thanksgiving. The living room, dining room, and breakfast room, and part of the library have been furnished, and if you could only see the old casa now, everything looks beautiful. And much to my surprise, the room that made up the best is the dining room. It looks palatial, so please tell Dad when you write that you heard the house looks grand. He is so happy in it and is doing his best to please us."
The building of La Casa Nueva was bittersweet for the Temple family, as Laura, Walter's wife, died of cancer shortly after construction began. Along with his work at the homestead, Walter Temple was involved with walnut farming, oil, and real estate development in Los Angeles, the San Gabriel Valley, and elsewhere. His biggest real estate project was the town of Temple, known today as Temple City, which he created in 1923 in honor of his family. As with his father and grandfather 50 years before, Walter Temple was beset by financial problems, and by 1932, lost everything, including the homestead. After the Temples left, the property was used as a boys' military school and a convalescent hospital before the City of Industry acquired the homestead. Restoration took place starting in the late 1970s, and the homestead opened to the public in the spring of 1981. Preservation and restoration efforts continue today. The museum's collection of objects and a research library are available to the public both in person and online.
The homestead has a collection of 30,000 artifacts, which range from books, manuscripts, documents, photographs, maps, and items related to the workman and Temple families. And we use those to help with the stories of Greater Los Angeles from 1830 to 1930, and it gives a three-dimensional perspective to what usually is a two-dimensional experience. We want our collection to be accessible to almost anybody. So from ages 9 to 90, we'd like people to be able to come out and either experience the collection through exhibits, programs that we have, or research. And again, the idea is for them to make a personal connection between the artifact and the stories they hear to enrich their experience and make them advocates for our history.
In addition to school programs and tours, people can take part in a number of special events, including book clubs, workshops, and lectures.
So throughout the year, the Homestead offers a variety of different programs that really help bring history to life. You know, it's one thing to read a book or to watch a movie, but to actually have the opportunity to immerse yourself in a historic site is something very special and inspiring. Although the Workman and Temple families didn't get to stay here for as long as they would have liked, they left us with a unique way to look back on the region's history and to see the different ways that we're still connected to history today.